Welcome to Elasmo Week. I'm Dr. David Schiffman, and I'm your host for the week. Elasmo Week is an online outreach event about the science of elasmobranchs, shark skates and rays, and the scientists who study them. This week is all about diversity. The goal is to highlight the diversity of scientists, the many ways of doing elasmobranch research, and to show off as many weird and wonderful species as possible every year. Elasmo Week wants to make a platform where real scientists can share their love and work with the public. Tonight, we have two speakers that I'm pleased to introduce to you. Jennie Janssen is an assistant curator at the National Aquarium in Baltimore, where she leads the team of aquarists that care for the aquarium's large marine fishes, including elasmobranchs, as well as their jellyfish gallery and the culture lab. She has a bachelor's in biology from Southern Adventist University and a master's in biology from Andrews University. She started studying shark parasitology as an undergraduate research intern at the Tennessee Aquarium, examining the parasitic copepods that live on smooth dogfish sharks, and participated in various field projects at the Bimini Biological Field Station, as well as Rosario Beach Marine Laboratory and the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries science team. She then became an aquarist at Ripley's Aquarium of the Smokies, and later became part of the team that opened Georgia Aquarium. As a senior aquarist, caring for the whale shark exhibit and the varied shark species cohabiting with the whale sharks, she expanded the breadth of her elasmobranch husbandry and handling experience, and later co-authored a chapter in the Elasmobranch Husbandry Manual on the training and conditioning of elasmobranchs in aquaria. In addition to her work with elasmobranchs, she is also an accomplished jellyfish aquarist, but that's a whole other story. Beyond her primary responsibilities of animal care at the National Aquarium, she serves on the National Aquarium Research Committee, the AZA Saving Animals from Extinction Shark and Ray Steering Committee, and a research associate with the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History. Her current projects include the launching of the International Census of Condrithians in Human Care, also known as Census, developing methods to detect the presence of jellyfish by checking seawater samples for jellyfish DNA, describing a new species of box jellyfish, and co-authoring the recent description of the stinging cells found in jellyfish snot. Just Google mucus grenades. You can follow her on Twitter at JellyJanssen. Also speaking tonight is Simone Barkley. Simone is a proud Baltimore-born scientist and educator who has a BS from Hampton University in Marine and Environmental Sciences and a master's degree from Delaware State University in Natural Resources. Simone has studied algae, blue crabs, sand tiger, and sandbar sharks over the years in undergraduate and graduate school. After graduate school, she was placed in NOAA's Office of Education during her Sea Grant Knauss Fellowship. Currently, Simone manages educational programs at the National Aquarium with a special emphasis on providing environmental literacy to youth in Baltimore, and is the host of NOAA Ocean Today every full moon. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Simone Barkley, Manager Education Programs at National Aquarium, and I'm so excited to be here doing Elasmo Week 2020. And I have with me Jennie Janssen. Jennie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Jennie Janssen, and I'm one of the assistant curators here at National Aquarium. And with us representing public aquariums, I thought it might be fun to start out with, when you randomly meet people on the street, and being that we work in an aquarium, what do people normally ask you?
So usually when I meet people, they ask me, do I take care of the fish? Am I training the dolphins? Am I an aquarist, basically? And it's funny because I am not an aquarist, but that's normally what people think when they hear that I work at an aquarium. What do people normally ask you?
They normally ask me probably same, like, do you work with the animals, or do you swim with the sharks? And then I'm like, yeah, I do, which is amazing. But then it just blows their minds, which is so funny. But yeah.
That's amazing, actually, because I wish that I was the person that was swimming with the sharks, right? So you have a really, really cool job. Can you tell us a little bit about like how you got here?
Yeah, and it's funny because when I was a kid and when I was growing up, like, that was my dream. The dream that I dared not to dream was, oh, it would be awesome if I could have a job where I swam with sharks every day. And it seemed crazy to me. It wasn't something that I actually even strived for. Like, I went to college and I was an undeclared major because I was like into art, and I was into music, and I was kind of mechanically inclined and all this other stuff. Basically, I knew I wasn't into history. That's about it. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do, but my parents, of course, being semi-immigrant, well, immigrant parents, but my dad is like, on my dad's side, I'm like second generation. On my mom, I'm like fourth. So like third average generation Chinese American. They're like, well, of course you're going to be a doctor. So, you know, I kind of had to break it to them. I don't know that that's going to happen. I don't really know what direction I'm going. But they were like, well, we don't want to hinder you from being yourself. So just make sure you take all the classes for the MCAT. As long as you take the prereqs, then you can do whatever you want. And then if you change your mind later, you can take the MCAT to be a doctor. I did find out later there was a sort of, if you take the MCAT classes, then you will also be in classes with guys who are going to take the MCAT. So there was some of that too. But in the end, I ended up being a biology major because I had, I took some of those classes, and one of the teachers was like, no, you can totally work with sharks. And I was like, what? No, only people on TV do that. And he was like, no, really, like you could do that. And so I took him at his word, and I was like, okay. And he introduced me to a friend of his at the Tennessee Aquarium, who was a shark parasitologist, the late Dr. George Benz, who I miss so much. But he took me under his wing and took me on as a research intern. And I started doing shark parasitology research, and it was amazing. It was so much fun. It was fascinating. But it was hard because, of course, my parents, they were like, you need to be a doctor. And they felt like the time that I was spending on this research internship was not valuable. And they were worried that they were worried that, of course, because it's an unpaid internship, that I was being taken advantage of and my volunteer time, but because I was spending a lot of time, because I was having a great time. It was fascinating work, and the people were amazing. And one day I went into George's office, and I was just in tears, so frustrated because, you know, the parents were like, you need to stop doing that. That's such a, you know, it's a terrible thing and all this. And he sat me down, and he really understood and was like, you know, even to my parents, I'm little Georgie Benz. And he ended up writing a beautiful little letter to my parents, basically explaining to them all the things that I had already told them over the phone. But because it was on Aquarium letterhead and signed by the chief research scientist, they received this letter, and in turn, my dad, who is very formal, sent me a very formal email letter saying, oh, how proud we are that you're doing this original work, and Dr. Benz, yada, yada, yada. And I literally have saved both of those letters, and I have those. And that had basically, that interaction opened the door for me to continue down this path, and that has been crucial. And after that time, I went and got my master's. I started working as an aquarist at Ripley's Aquarium in the Smokies. I then became a senior aquarist at Georgia, helped open there, working with the whale sharks and the manta rays. I mean, how cool is that? You know, so having the job where you're swimming with sharks every day.
Wow.
And then the question becomes, well, what's next? What's after that? I've gotten what I was hoping for. Now what? So then I ended up switching galleries after many years, and started working with jellyfish, which were also fascinating. And then moved on to an assistant curator position here at National Aquarium, overseeing the jellies. And then a couple years later, inheriting the large fish and shark exhibits here. So now my profession is my professional life has come full circle, which is really fantastic. So I've been very, very fortunate in that realm. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so.
And you have an interesting story too. How did you come to be in this field and at National Aquarium?
Okay, so first of all, I'm so sorry, Jennie. Your story is amazing. Like, I did not know all of these things, and I'm so glad that I was able to hear them for the first time right now, actually, because my reactions are super genuine when you see me like, oh my gosh, like, that is so cool. I love that. And like talking about your family and their feelings and their expectations definitely resonates with me. So thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. So I actually, I'm from Baltimore, you know, and I was born here. My family's here, everyone. And when I grew up, I always like really liked nature, but I never been to a beach when I was in elementary or even middle school. I hadn't gone to a beach or anything yet. And at one point, like if you've ever been to Baltimore, there's a Patapsco River that is here. The Patapsco River is here, and there's a park that is in the area where I used to live, the neighborhood where I used to live, called Middle Branch Park. And my grandmother and I would go down to Middle Branch Park, and then the river is like right kind of off of that park area. And I was like, oh, well, this is cool. Like, this is a nice park. I love that it's green. Because like where we lived, there really weren't like a lot of like fields or anything. It's in the city. There wasn't really anything except concrete. So we really enjoyed going to the park, which was just like right behind our neighborhood. But the Patapsco River was right there, but I had no idea like what it was called, or, you know, I didn't know about the Chesapeake Bay. But I still was interested. I still thought it was really cool. Ended up going to private school for middle and high school. And once I went to private school, I learned a little bit more about the Chesapeake Bay and, like, you know, your watershed, things that are in your background. Hadn't known these things before when I was in elementary school. And so as I'm in school, I'm like, oh, like, this is some pretty fascinating stuff, right? Like, you know, the nature and environment, right? Those things are really cool. So I wanted to learn more. I started to read books, continue to watch, like, you know, nature documentaries and things on TV. And I was like, okay, I want to study marine science. And I remember everyone in my class finding out that I liked marine science, and they were like, oh, Simone, like, you want to study the ocean? Like, why? Like, they thought it was kind of weird, but it was funny. Like, they always kind of like crowned me or deemed me like the marine biologist, and I had no idea marine biology really was, you know, like I didn't really know what it was then, but I'm like, oh, I want to study the ocean, and that's it. So in high school, when I just joined ninth grade, you had to get volunteer hours for you to graduate, of course. And so I found out that there was a way that I could get volunteer hours at the National Aquarium. So my mom was like, you need to apply. And my mom's very, she's very supportive and wanting me to, you know, like follow whatever kind of like dreams I have, or if there's something I'm interested in. She's always been supportive of that. So she was like, well, why don't you go ahead and apply to National Aquarium? So I did that, and I joined the Student Summer Volunteer Program, which is now the Youth Exhibit Guide program here. We still have that same program, which is interesting. So once I joined that program, you get like this huge binder, like it's a really thick binder, and it's about every exhibit in the aquarium. And so I had to study and sit through lectures about each of these exhibits, and then you take pretty much like a test. At least back then, we pretty much took a test to see how much we remembered, you know, to test our knowledge of the exhibits, because the placement was that, you know, I would be stationed in the galleries, and when any of the guests came through, if they had a question, I would be the person answering those questions. So they expected me to be an expert, really. So I had to learn about everything in here. I actually still have that binder to this day. I found it recently, and we've changed some of our galleries now. It's very interesting to look back at it. But I studied really hard, and when I was younger, I really loved school. Like, I liked to take tests. Like, it was fun for me to be like, oh yeah, I know this. Let me just write this answer out. Like, who? So it was really exciting for me. Took the test and was able to be an exhibit guide. And I remember my favorite spots in the aquarium was Shark Alley. That was always one of my favorite ones. And
mine too.
Yeah, it's great, right? And I remember like seeing the sawfish there, and you would get like props that you could use when you were on the floor. So this is not the same one, I'm sure, but I did get a sawfish rostrum that like I would have when I would be in the gallery, and I would talk to guests about it, and that's just kind of like how I lured them in. I'm like, yeah, look at this thing that I have. Do you know what this is? Come over here and talk to me so I can tell you, you know? And it was really fun, right? And then after I did that summer volunteering here, I was like, all right, this is it. I'm definitely studying marine science. Like if I ever had like any doubt, like that doubt is gone now that I've done my service hours at the National Aquarium. And so I decided I would go to college and study marine science. And so I did just that. And when I went to Hampton University to study marine science, and it's funny because I went to a historically Black college, University Hampton is, and there was a very, like, we have a really good marine science program, but it's a very small program. We had maybe 7 or 8 people in our class, and we probably graduated every year, like that same number. We definitely didn't have a large department, and while I was there, I got to do things that I had never done before. Like I went seining, and I was like, oh wow, like this is a cool thing. Like, you know, we can take this net and collect some fish. Like it probably wasn't that exciting, but to me, it was like, oh, this is one of the best things I've ever done. Or we, you know, did like benthic sampling, and I was like, wow, like I got to see a polychaete for the first time. Like, ooh, a polychaete, a worm. Like, but to me, it was amazing. And so I did that while I was at Hampton, and I also continued on and went to graduate school. And when I went to grad school, that's when I really like honed in and studied sharks. And I guess I should mention that when I was an undergrad, I had one internship that gave me some exposure to sharks. I was able to do some research with Dr. Richard Brill and Dr. Peter Bushnell on sharks in Eastern Shore. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. So I definitely want to study sharks. And my professors were very supportive in helping me to find a graduate school where I could go into a program and study sharks for my master's work. And so that's what I did. I went to Delaware State University and studied sand tiger and sandbar sharks and really looked at the interactions with humans, especially when it comes to angling. So we really looked at like the pressures that like the recreational angling community has on those species of sharks, especially since they're prohibited. And it was amazing. Like I would go on the boat every day and catch sharks and wake up at the crack of dawn so that we could be on the water and stay on the water all day. Yeah, so it was exciting, and I really enjoyed it. I loved it so much. But, you know, I realized that while I really enjoyed research and I really loved doing the work on sharks and like being up close and personal to them and like hands-on, like really touching sharks, and my family would be like, you know, my mom would be like, are you wearing a life jacket? You need to be making sure that you're wearing a life jacket. You also need to make sure that you that you're doing exercises because you have to be strong, because what if something happens? I'm like, Mom, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. She was like, you're gonna be on the boat every day. Like it was really funny. So it was interesting to hear you talk about how your family perceived it and my family as well.
Yes.
So like, you're on a boat every day with sharks. I was seeing her pictures of like the sand tigers, and she would be like, okay, Simone, like
You can just imagine the things that they're thinking, right?
right, exactly. So but I really enjoyed that. I also felt like it didn't give me a connection to people that I really wanted. And so even though my work, I did work with people, right, since we were doing work with the fishing community, but I don't think that it gave me a connection with people from my community and people that like I grew up with. Maybe like it was hard for me to figure out how to make it relatable to them and make my work relatable to them. And so what I wanted to do was kind of pivot a little bit and focus on education. And so throughout my graduate work, I would kind of do like outreach anyway. Like I would go to festivals and talk to people about, you know, like the pressure that the fishing pressure that is on those sharks, and like try to just, you know, raise awareness. But I wanted to do more. And so I was like, okay, when I'm done graduate school, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue with the research, even though, again, of course, I love it. I want to figure out how I can connect back to my community just a little bit more prominently. And so I went to the Canals Fellowship, which is a marine policy fellowship. And I joined NOAA's Office of Education. And in that office, I really worked on like connecting people at aquariums actually to some like large initiatives like youth development or community resilience and things of that nature, and environmental literacy. And so I was like, oh wow, like these are things that I think really help to build like a personal connection. We still obviously need the science, right? Because that's the thing that we're communicating about when we are doing youth development and building resiliency. But it was easier for me then to see like my work being put to practice, right? I could see the results of it, and me working with people. And so as I finished the Canals Fellowship, I learned more about zoos and aquariums through that fellowship, since I partnered with them in one of the programs. And I was like, maybe I'll go to an aquarium. And it just so happened that I ran into our CEO here at an AZA conference when I was in my fellowship, and like we talked, and I shared my story about how I started out at the aquarium, right, as a youth exhibit guide. And it's kind of like a full circle sort of a thing for me as well. So, I started out here, and then I came back here, right? And now I lead the education programs at the aquarium. So I'm able to connect to people in my hometown, which is really, really important to me. And I still get to do work with animals, even though like I'm not the researcher anymore, but I still am connected with animals through a lot of the work that we do here. So that's my story.
That's awesome. And honestly, I am so proud of the work that you guys do with the community here in Baltimore, because the aquarium is right here in the city. And the things that we do with the students, sorry, the lights just went out in the room. I forgot that I was here. But yeah, the work that you guys do with the students throughout the city is wonderful. And I just love that. And that to me is what we should be doing as public aquariums.
Yes.
So, yeah. Excellent.
Yes. That was great.
So we talked about what people think you do, but what is it that you like on a day-to-day? What is it that you really do?
Sure. So a lot of my work is about like strategic partnerships and like partnering with school districts or community groups, or like after school program locations maybe, so that we can provide programming to those groups of students. And so my work is really around like building those partnerships, so that we can then do exactly what you said, Jennie, so that we can come in and like work with the students so that we can build environmental literacy. So usually I'm in a lot of meetings, but when it's a really fun day, I'm able to like meet with students and see them and like take them on cool trips. We take students on week-long camps across or down the East Coast usually. So we've taken them to Delaware, to Florida, to North Carolina, to Maine. We take them lots of places, and they get to each camp kind of has a theme. So we do like sea turtles, or we do horseshoe crabs, or coral reef. And this is really great because the students then get an opportunity to, they get an opportunity to go swimming in the ocean, right? And snorkeling, and they get to go seining. And those were things that I didn't do until I was in college. And and these camps are open for students from they are as young as going into the 5th grade all the way through senior year of high school. So it really kind of like reiterates that, get students early, like get them exposed to science early, because who knows, we could be building the next generation of like aquarists and of all of the researchers. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So how about you? What's your day-to-day like?
Well, now it's funny. So like in the life of a normal aquarist, like when you're an aquarist, yes, you're feeding the fish and you're prepping the food and all the things that you would normally think of. You would, you work with the life support, you do a lot of diving depending on which exhibits you're taking care of. But you're also like, you're ordering the food, you're unloading the trucks, you're doing the dishes, because if you feed a lot of stuff, you got to do the dishes too. You're squeegeeing a lot of floors, you're keeping things clean, because the cleaner you keep the environment for the animals here at the aquarium, just like in the real world, the more healthy everything can be. So, there's a lot of that elbow grease that goes on, but, it's also amazing, where you get to work with the veterinarians and everything that goes on. And we have, different opportunities to get out and do real conservation ourselves every once in a while. And for me, in addition to working with the animals hands-on and seeing their behaviors, how they interact with each other, how they interact with the humans, seeing the ecosystems that we create and how they they interact is really interesting. But getting out into the field is like the gravy on top of being an aquarist. And, you know, I've been very, very fortunate to, you know, like when Georgia was open the whale sharks, you know, stuff. It's like I got to go out to Taiwan, work with a variety of elasmobranchs in addition to the whale sharks out there. I've gotten to participate in invasive coral surveys down in the Keys with EPA and Georgia Tech. I've worked with Sea Corps International doing coral restoration by collecting gametes from endangered corals in the wild and then bringing them into the lab to help them reproduce at a higher success rate than they would if they were just, you know, left to the natural environment. And working with UNAM in Mexico. And it's been phenomenal, all the different things that we get to do on the side. And in addition to with sharks specifically, working, you know, with National Aquarium and several partners on the research side and getting everybody together. You know, we take our boat out, we will go catch sand tigers, and instead of us just tagging, there's a whole group of sand tiger researchers, and we get all the information that they're looking for, and we can very quickly, within like 20 minutes, work up an animal, multiple people pulling tiny little samples from one animal, and you get to help like 20 different projects.
Right.
And just make the most use out of the time and each individual animal that we find. And if it's not a target species, we'll still tag it and note it and send it on its way. But I was actually flipping through a lot of pictures, you know, in preparation for this, and I was looking at our shark fishing pictures from last year, and I was just like, oh, I was so happy out on the water. It was so much fun. But, you know, just great camaraderie, you know, working together with your teammates. And that's one thing about being an aquarist, especially if you're working on a large exhibit like a shark exhibit, is that there's nothing you can do by yourself. It's like you are always working with a team. There are multiple people there. There is always a number of people to help you accomplish a single task. And that's hugely important for, you know, working in our field. But yeah, extremely blessed to have had all these different opportunities and experiences. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Oh man, I definitely feel you when you are talking about how when you were fishing last year, and you know, you just had so much fun. Like just even thinking about it, I haven't been on a boat to catch sharks in probably 2 years, I would say. It's definitely been 2 years for me. And oh my gosh, like it definitely, it always, you remember it. You remember that even though you're out there for what can be like 9 hours, 10 hours, like you still really enjoy it, right?
Oh yeah, you're exhausted.
Yeah, for sure.
Exhausted.
And each is exciting though, right? Like each one.
But it's great.
Yeah.
And you're as tired as you are, you're like, tomorrow.
Exactly. So just to give a little bit more about what I usually do. So sometimes when we're doing programs, our programs also have themes. So we might talk about like adaptations, or we might talk about the Chesapeake Bay. And sometimes we talk about sharks. And so a lot of times when we do that, I don't really have a shark per se to show the students when we are doing this, unless we have like pictures or video. But I do often have some props similar to the rostrum. So I'll show some of those, and we can kind of talk about how you might be able to tell what a shark eats just by looking at its jaws, because this is something that we normally do with our students. And it's really interesting what they think that sharks eat, what students think that sharks eat versus what they actually do. So for example, and Jenny, please feel free to like give off some ideas or facts about some of these sharks, because some of these jaws I'm going to show you are sharks that we have in our aquarium, like this one. I'm trying to not cover my face with it, but this is the jaws of a nurse shark. And so I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit so that folks can get like a good look. And so I'm gonna like flip it over because a lot of people know that like sharks have, you know, like rows and rows of teeth. And these are probably not the teeth that you think about sharks having usually when you are mentioning shark's teeth, but this is from the nurse shark. And so nurse sharks actually eat like crustaceous things with the shell. And so what's really cool about these teeth is that it's kind of like to help you like crush and grind a little bit. Similar to like if you eat crabs and you kind of use like a mallet or something to like help you crack your shell. That's kind of like how their teeth are. We have nurse sharks here. And if you've ever seen a nurse shark, you might usually like see them kind of like laying on the bottom of the exhibit. And you can kind of, it might be a hint at what they're eating if you are seeing these animals usually stay kind of near the bottom. As compared to a shark with teeth like this, right? Like obviously they're not eating the same things. So before we talk about this one, Jennie, is there anything you want to share about our nurse sharks since we have some here?
Yes, we actually have 3 nurse sharks in the Shark Alley exhibit, and they're funny. They're rather entertaining. The one largest female that we have, she's actually been here the longest, and she's, you know, she's been here, and she may be our oldest shark. She's been here since like the early 90s. Actually, she may be here longer than that. Wow. Now that I'm thinking about her record, but nonetheless, she is our largest animal. She's very long. Much of her is tail as well. But it's interesting. I love to point out to people that like with a nurse shark, they spend most of their time on the bottom. They do get up and swim, but if you look at the tail, and if you notice the shark that's on the wall behind you, you'll see the tail actually has an upper and a lower lobe, sort of like a boomerang. The nurse shark, that lower lobe is almost completely missing because they spend the most of the time on the bottom. So that, you know, it would just kind of be digging in the dirt. So it just really doesn't even exist there. So that's a neat feature of that animal that matches their behavior.
Wow, perfect. So a shark like, a shark like this one. This one, I'm just gonna get up close, hopefully, so that you all can see the teeth. We've had these for a while, and using cameras on things like this is very interesting. So I'm sorry if it is hard to tell, but what's really cool, hopefully you can see, maybe if I put my hand, okay, yeah, so that's what I'm trying to show is that like, even you can see on their teeth, like even the sides, right, are serrated, which is very, very interesting and cool. And our teeth are not like that. And you can, of course, see the rows of teeth again here. So what, Jennie, let's play along. What do you think a shark that has the jaws like this eats?
It seems like they would eat something that moves faster.
Yes, right. So maybe like a fish that might be swimming, right? Because these teeth are pointy and serrated, like they're probably wanting to catch something that might be slippery, right? And that might get away. And so where do you think a shark that has teeth like that, like where in the water column would you find it usually? Do you think it would be on the bottom, or do we think that it might be a shark that is like right? So we think that this should not be a shark that's like a nurse shark that is benthic. This would be a shark that, you know, swims in the water column, right? And it's catching those fish that they are eating. My head is, there we go. And it's catching those fish there. And so we also, similar to that one, we have a short fin mako. This is a short fin mako. And you can see that you know what they're eating, right?
I love those teeth. I love those teeth.
Yeah.
They're so mean looking.
Yes, like fierce.
Yes.
Fierce, for sure. Especially the way the teeth look.
I once had a necklace with a mako tooth, and every time I would hug somebody, it was like, ow!
Yeah, oh, the mako white. Wow. It kind of reminds you, I've been watching Jurassic Park the last couple of nights, and it kind of reminds you of a dinosaur.
Yes, very much.
Mm-hmm.
Very much. especially that narrowing of the
Yes.
jaws.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Wow.
You know, it's interesting that you're talking about shark's teeth, because part of my parasitology work was working with the shark skin, which the scales on the skin are called dermal denticles,
They
because
are.
the composition of those scales is like your teeth. And so what was interesting when we were looking about that is we were looking at parasitic copepods, which are really, really tiny. It's funny, we go shark fishing and we'll see little copepods on the sand tigers, and I'm like, oh, that's this, and that's that parasite, and everybody's like, can we take them off? And I was like, can I keep it?
Yes. Oh my gosh, when we used to shark fish, I used to see so many of them on the sand tigers, like especially like down here under their jaws. I had pictures
or out on the tail, and
Yes.
So the thing that we were looking at was the specificity of where they were attaching, because only certain parasitic copepods are found in certain places and on certain species.
Yeah.
And you will see a lot of the females together, and the males tend to move around more. And then we would actually look at the attachment appendages, and I'm, you know, with my thumbs and whatever, the females of the species we were looking at had these cute little thumb-looking appendages, and the scales in the places we would find them kind of had these fluted surfaces, and they would actually just fit right in, so they could kind of lock in and stay right in that specific place. And we would look at other places on the body, and the scales might be flat, and they wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't find them in those places. So it was very, very interesting looking at that spatial distribution for each specific species.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up dermal denticles, because I remember when I was doing another kind of like education program, and we were talking about dermal denticles, and we like found out that, you know, there have been like Olympic swimmers suits that have been modeled after those, which is fantastic, right? To think that because sharks are really like efficient swimmers, and those dermal denticles definitely help them with that. Like that technology is now being, you know, used in other areas, which is fantastic.
I remember I think it was one of those things that made me feel like I was super cool and maybe doing something interesting when I was doing my internship, because one of the stack of papers that I was given to study in the beginning of my internship was a NASA technical report on the fluted, you know, of that you know, that variegated surface, creating less drag in the water, and therefore creating less drag in the swimsuits and aircraft and things like that. And I was just like, this is a NASA technical report. Am I supposed to have this? It was very cool.
Yes. Isn't that amazing to like just think about how, you know, like the anatomy, right? And of just naturally occurring animals and fish, right? How we then use that to help us develop, you know, aircraft or swimsuits.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yes, it really is. It's amazing.
Yes, so amazing. And so one of the last ones that I'm going to show, this one is from a zebra shark, which we have here as well. So we're definitely going to have Jennie talk a little bit about our zebra sharks.
Yes.
I just wanted to let people see.
Yeah, those are much finer.
Yes, right. Kind of compared to like the nurse shark. You know, looks a little different. Definitely finer for sure.
Yeah, so we have a zebra shark on exhibit in the Blacktip Reef exhibit right now, and her name is Zoe. She's a sweet female zebra shark. She's been here for quite some time as well, and she often hangs out in this little cave area of the exhibit where there's actually flow, so she'll just rest on the bottom, and she just hangs out there. And sometimes it's like, come on, girl, it's time to eat. And we'll give her a little tug, and she's like, man, I'm good. But she is so charismatic. Just she has this kind of blasé personality, but she's really, really sweet. And she, you know, as zebra sharks, they spend a lot of time on the bottom, but they actually spend a lot of time in the midwater too. So they also have sort of that truncated lower lobe of their caudal or tail fin, but they actually spend a lot of time in the water. And it seems like half their body is tail, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, they're polka dotted as adults. And everybody's like, I'm not seeing the zebra. Why are you calling it a zebra shark? And it's like, well, because when they first hatch out of the egg case, which is, egg case is about this big, and they're amazing. When they hatch out, they're freaking adorable. They really are. They're so cute, but they're dark with like white stripes. And as an aquarist, trying to take care of a batch that all kind of hatch out, within days of each other. The first one or two hatch out, and it's like, okay, that one's so-and-so, and that one's so-and-so. But as you day to day, those stripes shift really quickly. And then you have like 2 or 3 more show up, and then you're trying to keep them straight, but they're so tiny, you don't want to like microchip them yet. And so you're trying to keep them straight. And then after a point, you're like, yeah, I don't know who's who. But very quickly, they end up becoming that lighter coloration with the white polka dots. And you can see some of the remnants of those stripes, in their pattern underneath that. But the change happens surprisingly fast. It's really hard to keep track of who is who. Like, I'm going to go on weekend for 2 days. You come back and you're like, yeah, I don't know who's who.
Oh, wow. That sounds amazing. And yes, I definitely have seen Zoe hanging out in our exhibit, just kind of relaxing and in that corner. I definitely have seen her there.
Yeah, it's funny. The whiptail rays will also park right in there behind her. We'll call it the parking lot because she pulls in first, and they like come up behind her on the flank, and they all just sit there and they rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of our sharks that we have that I really love, that it's always kind of like a scavenger hunt to find this shark, but I love doing it every day, is the woebegong.
Yes. She may be my favorite shark here.
Yeah.
Just because she's so weird. Yeah. I love her. She is a tasseled woebegong, and I love the fact that the species name is Daisy Pogon, which has nothing to do with a daisy, but the spotting patterns, if you look at the tasseled woebegong, the spotting pattern looks like there's little daisies around all over the body. And so that's my little connection with there. But it's amazing to look at the frills around the mouth, how well they camouflage. But it's just, I think about like the development of these animals, and how do the cells know I'm gonna be a little barbel out here like this, and I'm gonna, it's just the differentiation of the cells in the development process is just, it's mind blowing to me. Yeah.
It's definitely astonishing, and I feel the same way when I like really got a good like up close look for the first time. I was like, whoa! First, like you're right, the camouflage is amazing. Like sometimes it's really hard for me to find her in the exhibit, and when I do, I'm like, this is crazy, right? Like.
And the teeth inside are pretty gnarly. Like they don't show them often. And another reason that I love her is she's a great exhibit animal because she actually likes to sit right in front of the window, in front of one of the windows where kids like climb up and get like right in there. And then she's like right in their face and they don't even realize
it. And they don't even know it, yes.
But she's also a great eater, which is like, that's wonderful for me. It's like, I don't have to worry about you. I'm just going to, do you want the food? And it's clearly yes or no. Some days she's just like, away with you. And other days she's just like boom, and she takes it, and it's always a great thing because people are like, what are you doing? What's the fish for? And then all of a sudden they see it and they're like, there's an animal there. And they're always surprised. And it honestly, because she's gotten so big that honestly, I'll take the feeding pole down there and I'm like, don't jump. It's not cool. Don't jump. Wow. But she's amazing. She's an amazing animal. Gosh. Yeah.
Jennie, do you want to share a little bit about like kind of your day to day as well? Like
yeah. So I mean, for our day to day when we first come in is we come in and like we might check our emails for the first couple of minutes just to make sure there weren't any brush fires overnight that we weren't aware of. But we'll immediately go through all of our exhibits and just do quick AM checks and make sure that everybody's like nothing's gone awry overnight in the hours that we were gone. Everybody looks, like everything's normal. Everybody's where they should be. We're not finding any leaks anywhere. All the life support sounds like it's running properly, because even even just having your ears tuned to like, okay, that pump's not supposed to sound that way. You know, that kind of stuff is important. We'll take water samples, we'll send them off to the lab to get water quality tested on a regular basis. When that comes back later, we'll check all that to make sure everything's within the normal ranges. If we need to do any buffer additions, we'll do that. We'll do food prep. Sometimes we have volunteers, sometimes we don't. Right now with COVID, you know, we are getting some of our volunteers back, but you know, we've been running on skeleton crews, but we'll do all of our food prep, clean everything up, do our feeds in, you know, whatever order needs to happen. Right now it's getting our feeds done before the public ever sets foot in, because the more that we're out feeding, the more it distracts them and more people stop. And we want to keep people moving. So public flow, we have to, you know, arrange our schedules of when we are doing things so that we are not another distraction necessarily, but people love seeing people in the water.
Yep.
It's like, we want you to look at the animals, but whenever they see a human in there, they're like, oh my God, there's a human in the water.
Yeah.
And they're so enthused by it. But we will do the food prep. Some of that we feed from the surface. Some of it we will tongue feed, like the sharks, or pole feed. Some of it we will feed by diver. It just depends on the animal and the exhibit. Some animals are more recluse and in places where we can't reach them from the surface, and so they'll be fed by diver. Other ones that are, you know, that we can reach by full, or that we've trained them to come to a target and they will come to us and we will feed them there. Some of them, like we have some of our animals that are trained to swim through a stretcher, so that when the time comes that we need to pull them up for an exam, they swim through the stretcher and we can pull them out of the exhibit and get our hands on them without stressing the animal too much. Other animals, we might shift them into a different location so that they can feed without having a lot of competition. We'll do that in Shark Alley, where we have the animals swim into certain sections and we drop gates that divide different taxa so that they're not interfering and having a lot of competition. Then the aquarists can either feed them in turn, or we can divide and conquer and feed the different animals, and then open everything up so everybody can be amongst each other once more. You know, and then of course there are lots of dishes, you know, and then there's projects and things like plumbing projects, new holding systems for every exhibit. There's a number of holding systems in the back that we also manage that are for a variety of different things. We have a whole separate quarantine facility, especially for the larger animals, so that we can quarantine over here. There's a whole different staff that takes care of that. You know, we do routine medical exams on these animals to just make sure everybody's okay. If we have a species or an animal that is new, then we might pull them, you know, to get some baseline data. Also, some animals that are more rare in collections, there's just not a lot of data out there. And part of some of the side project that I've been working on is it's the International Census of Condrithians in Human Care. It's a long name. I call it the Chondro Census because it's much easier to say. But basically, it's an international, it's a global census of all the Condrithians in human care. It's a reboot of the AES International Elasmo Survey, but census, but now we've brought it into the digital age, so it's web-based. Everyone's putting their data into it, and right now, like this week, we are working on, we and not me, I'm asking, and programmers are programming the search features and husbandry survey data so that we can input certain husbandry parameters so that search feature can be more useful, so that researchers and other elasmobranch Condrithian stakeholders can figure out like who has what, who else, how many, and all of these things, so that we can work together better, because every place is doing things a little bit differently. We generally, you know, have a set of best practices, but every facility has a different environment. It's like, well, mine is more round, mine is deeper, mine is, you know, this, that, or the other, or I have different animals. I have more competition in mine. Mine are just, you know, just Condrithians in this exhibit. So there's all different parameters so that we can all help each other through our collective experiences on how to take care of them as best we can, or if anybody sees anything that's an anomaly, it's like, have you seen this before? How have you addressed it? Has it been an issue? Is this a normal thing? Is it not? And we can all work together better for the collection for the species, as well as the ones in the wild, like specifically the sand tigers, which are, you know, they're protected here, but in other parts of the world, they're endangered.
I know.
You know, so the work all the knowledge that we collect around that species here is helping in the conservation efforts elsewhere in the world where it's much more dire. So all of that information with the census, we are adding to it a blood component where everybody who's taking blood samples, you know, someone's using a different analyzer, someone's pulling it from a different sinus, and somebody else is, you know, storing it differently or whatever. But this way, there's a standard of here is how to, where to take it, how to preserve it, how to process it, and based on what instrumentation you're using, then you can actually compare numbers to numbers with a particular shark species. And by having all of that information together, it's going to really help all the researchers and aquariums, you know, work together better for each of these species, which that's super exciting right now.
Yeah.
You know, and as far as being a manager, just like now that I'm a manager of aquarists, I'm not getting wet as often. I'm spending less time with the animals, but so yeah, so I spend a lot more time in front of the computer, which is not the most fun. But
I feel you.
But the best part of it is the opportunity to mentor the next group of aquarists and just being able to share, you know, the different experiences that you've picked up throughout your career at different places and helping them get a broader sense of, oh, there's a lot of different ways that we can do this and different ways that we can approach it, and helping them to grow in their careers, which is super exciting. And so I've been working on a couple of different projects where, you know, one is with animalprofessional.com, where they're actually using, because all the aquarium staff, we don't publish all that often because we're so busy taking care of the animals. That's not really built into our job descriptions to publish. And so culturally, we don't do a lot of that, but we will go to professional conferences and we will share information that way. And that website has started to capture all of those animal care presentations and have them as a digital library on the web and available to people so that we can go back and continue learning from each other and building up on top of that, because not everybody can go to a conference. Somebody has to stay and take care of the animals.
Right.
So, and then also in the jelly section of my world, I've started trying to get aquariums and researchers together, and I'm starting to coordinate a conference called Jelly Camp, which is basically bringing aquarists and researchers together to, you know, utilize our skill sets better together, because we're great at keeping them alive, but really I feel like the researchers, you know, they know so much more about the biology, but it's a really complementary knowledge set that, you know, it's like I really want to see us all working together more. So that's a lot of you know, what we do on a daily basis, and every day is different, which is kind of wonderful and kind of stressful, but it's, you know, I wouldn't give it up.
Yeah, wow. Definitely sounds like some exciting days for sure.
Very dynamic.
Yeah. And then we haven't really talked about, you mentioned our whiptail rays, but we haven't really talked about our rays. So if you want to share information about those, I think that would be awesome. I don't have a lot to add on to that. I don't have any props from rays or skates in here. I just have my shark stuff.
Yeah, no, we have a number of different ray species here. We've got the whiptail rays that are in the blacktip reef exhibit, which are really beautiful. They have this beautiful leopard-like pattern on their back, and it's just they're really impressive animals with that long slender tail, which is always it makes them extra graceful, I find. And then we've got a couple of southern stingrays that are off exhibit right now because of part of the COVID situation is that we have to manage our animals in different ways, but because they're normally in this very deep exhibit and we have not had, you know, the regular dives been able to support as much diving, so we move them into a different place where it's shallower, that we can just readily feed them and not have to worry about making sure that they're getting food 20 foot down. But we also have a rough-tailed stingray in Shark Alley, and he's a hoss. He's a big guy, And I love seeing him in there with all the big sharks because he totally holds his own with everybody else. And he's a wonderful animal. When we dive in there in Shark Alley, he's really inquisitive, and he'll just kind of come up, and it's just like, "What you doing, buddy?" And then he's just cool and collected. He's like, "Nothing. I just want to check you out," and he'll leave. But yeah, no, our ray collection is amazing, and of course, related to rays are our sawfish, which you have the rostrum that you were showing, and the sawfish are fantastic. I mean, we have 2 males of the Pristis pristis, and they are beautiful, beautiful specimens. They've been here for 15 odd years, and they have grown. They're big boys. But I actually love, it's like I've worked with a couple of different species of sawfish, and for this species, and it may be age related, I'm not entirely sure, but they've been in this exhibit for many, many years. But we drop the gates, they go to their station, and they're surprisingly chill for their species. Like normally, I've only seen pectinata be this chill, but for the Pristis pristis, like, you put the feeding pole down, and they just kind of like, "Okay, I'll just come over and I'll get it." And it's very nonchalant, and they take it. But all the other Pristis pristis I've worked with, they come over and they're like, and, they want to kill the fish.
Yeah.
But these guys are just like, "Yeah, no, I'm just good to take my food, thank you." So for their size, they're really chill, and they're graceful, and they're just beautiful, beautiful animals. And we take every opportunity we can to talk to them, to talk about them with the guests, because they are critically endangered. And so we have a very special place for them. And every year we try to do as much as we can for International Sawfish Day, and highlight them as a species.
Great. Yeah. Of course, I love the sawfish. Definitely the thing that made me be like, "Oh, I'm so interested in this." I love, it's fantastic.
They're such a unique body shape.
So Jennie, is there anything else that you want to share as we wrap up about being an aquarist, or special skill sets that you think make a really good aquarist?
Yeah, it's funny because even when I was trying to decide what I was going to do, I have all these varied things that I was into, but so many of them got tapped into with, like, with my artistic side. It was nice because we do worry about exhibitry. Not worry about, but it's one of the focuses of what we do, because we have these displays and we want them to be beautiful. We're taking the biology knowledge that we have, making sure that it's the right environment for the animal, but then also making it aesthetically pleasing for the guests, as well as trying to design it in such a way that it allows the animal to be out where the guests can see it. And then also just for me, it's always been really important to have kind of this heart for tinkering, so that mechanically inclined aspect of it is that, a lot of times we have to build our own tools, because this is, the aquarium field is growing in the last 10-15 years. It's grown quite a bit, but there's still, having specialty tools for things that we do. We still, steal from a lot of different places, and by and large, we make a lot of our own stuff. So, it's like, well, what am I going to raise this juvenile jelly in? What am I going to, feed this animal with? How am I going to rig up this stretcher? It's like, we're making all those things ourselves, and finding ways to do it. So that has been, even if, your artistic side, you can tap into that, your mechanical side, you can tap into that, with all the, large animal handlings, your athletic side taps into that. All these things, can come together, and, there are so many different skill sets that can play into being a good aquarist, and having a good mix of those people in your team, because you have to have a team, is always important.
Yeah, it's funny that you talked about, like, kind of building your own, because I remember when I was in grad school, when we were doing those shark surveys all of the time, we would use like a blocker rig. So we built these like blocker ganyons that like Captain Mark sent.
And we still use them.
I know, yeah. And we would have to take the PVC pipe and cut it up and all of these things, right? And I got there, I had never built anything when I got to grad school. I was like, y'all want me to what? Like, what do you want me to do? I had never even had a tool in my hand before. But nonetheless, I learned how to do it, and now I definitely know how. And it's funny because education is like that as well. Like sometimes we have to figure out, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to show the kids an experiment or something kind of like on the fly when we might try to have a plan and that plan backfires? And so it's definitely good to be creative, and it helps you to think on your feet and use what you got in front of you. It's very interesting and kind of exciting to see how you can like repurpose things, right? And make them a tool for whatever you need it for. Yeah.
Yep. And we, and like you were saying with PVC, it's like, it's like we use it to make tools, but we're also operating a lot of the life support for the smaller, normal sized exhibits. We might be building our own life support ourselves. We might be rebuilding those pumps and taking it apart and, installing a protein skimmer or, changing out a heat exchanger, whatever it is, and, on a regular basis, you're backwashing sand filters or what have you.
Right.
So we are, life support operators to a certain extent ourselves, on top of taking care of the animals. There's so much more that goes on behind the scenes than you really realize. And, for professional aquarists, there's a breadth of experience that's really needed, on top of just having that skill of being able to look at an animal and be like, yes, something's not quite right, or see how the interaction is playing out, as something is occurring, having those observational skills. That is something I don't know if you can teach. You can help it along, or you can help somebody to realize what they're looking for, but to be able to see it, I'm not sure that that's something that you can teach or not. But it's a crucially important part of what we do, because all of it is trying to make sure that we have the best welfare for all of the animals that we care for.
Yeah.
Right. But we care so much for them, and we love them with a passion as each individual species. But then on a personal level, each individual animal is different in how they behave, and even like what they like this one likes their stuff chopped up smaller than this guy. And sometimes it's like, I feel like I'm spoiling you. At the same time, I'm like, how do you survive in the wild?
Wow. Yes. Oh, I love it. I'm so lucky that I didn't, and blessed for sure, that I didn't have to completely remove myself right from the field, that I'm still able to have a connection, right? That I'm able to listen to your stories, and I'm able to see the sharks in our exhibits, or go to our animal care and rescue center and get up close if I want to kind of like get in touch with that side again, because I definitely miss it for sure. And I'm so blessed that I'm able to come into a place like an aquarium and still be able to have that connection. And I think that that's something that really resonates with me, is that I can still have an impact on people and still be connected to people, and still have time to spend with animals. And I still get my animal fix, I still get my research fix, I still get my day in the field, right? When we take our students out, or when we do it, and we do a lot of outdoor programming and a lot of partnerships with those who do research. And so I'm able to still get that, and that's something that I love so much about working here.
Yeah, I love how you've connected, how you grew up and your experiences, and what, the timeline of when you got to have those experiences. And now you get to influence when and how that happens for the next generation, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And very much in the same school system, in the same area, that you can see the reality of that, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So
oh man.
I applaud you in the work that you do in education.
Thank you, Jennie. And I definitely applaud you and love the work that you do.
Thank you.
And not just on our Elasmo rings, but also the jellies, because I don't want to leave the jellies out, even though I know it's Elasmo week.
Same. Yeah, I have dual loves. Sharks were my first love, but jellies have taken a chunk of my heart. So yes.
Oh, well, we've had a great time, and we hope that you have as well. And please use our webcam so you can see some of our sharks that we have, like in our black tip reef. And Happy
We have two
learning.
webcams. There's
Yes.
one in Black Tip Reef and there's one in the Jellies exhibit. So
Yes,
check 'em
jelly.
out.
So thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks, Jennie.
Thank you, Simone. Bye, everyone.